The Whispering Womb, a tale of fear and mystery. Chapter 1, The New Beginning. Anna was overjoyed when she discovered she was pregnant. After years of trying, she and her husband, Jack, were finally going to be parents. Their small countryside home was filled with laughter and dreams of the future. They painted the nursery a soft yellow and decorated it with tiny stuffed animals and baby blankets. Life seemed perfect. But as the months went on, strange things began to happen. It started with the whispers. Late at night, as Anna lay in bed, she would hear faint voices. They weren't Jack's. These whispers were soft, almost melodic, and seemed to come from inside the house. Must be my imagination, Anna told herself, stroking her growing belly. But the whispers grew louder each night. Chapter 2, The Cry in the Dark. One night, Anna woke up abruptly. Her heart pounded in her chest as she listened carefully. The house was silent, except for the occasional creak of the wooden floors. She was about to close her eyes again when she heard it, a baby crying. Her stomach dropped. It was faint, like the sound was coming from far away, but unmistakable. She turned to Jack, who was fast asleep, snoring softly. Confused and scared, Anna sat up and scanned the dark room. "Hello," she whispered, her voice trembling. No response. The crying stopped. Anna stayed awake for the rest of the night, unable to shake the feeling that something was wrong. Chapter 3, The Mirror Incident. As her pregnancy progressed, the strange occurrences became more frequent. One afternoon, as Anna stood in the bathroom brushing her hair, she glanced at the mirror. For a moment, she thought she saw someone standing behind her, a shadowy figure with glowing eyes. She spun around, but the room was empty. Her breathing quickened as she gripped the edge of the sink. "I'm just tired," she whispered to herself. "It's the hormones." But as she turned back to the mirror, she saw something that made her freeze. Her reflection was smiling, except Anna wasn't smiling. Her hands trembled as she backed out of the bathroom, her eyes fixed on the mirror until she was out of sight. Chapter 4, The Nursery. Jack was away on a work trip, leaving Anna alone in the house. That night, as she walked past the nursery, she noticed the door was slightly ajar. She was certain she had closed it earlier. Nervously, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was cold, much colder than the rest of the house. The stuffed animals seemed to stare at her with lifeless eyes. Suddenly, the rocking chair in the corner began to move, creaking softly as it rocked back and forth. Anna's throat went dry. "Who's there?" she whispered, clutching her belly protectively. The whispers returned, louder this time. They seemed to surround her, filling the room with an eerie, otherworldly hum. She turned and ran out, slamming the door shut behind her. Chapter 5, The Midwife's Warning. Anna decided to visit her midwife, Mrs. Holloway, the next morning. The older woman had been a midwife in the village for decades and was known for her kindness and wisdom. As Anna explained the strange events, Mrs. Holloway's face grew serious. "There's something you should know," the midwife said, her voice low. "Your home, it has a history. Decades ago, a pregnant woman named Margaret lived there. She went mad and, well, they say she harmed herself and her unborn child." Anna's blood ran cold. "Why didn't anyone tell us this before we moved in?" Mrs. Holloway shook her head. "People don't like to talk about it. But you must be careful. Whatever is happening in that house might not be your imagination." Chapter 6, The Shadow's Touch. That night, Anna couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, every creak and groan of the house making her jump. Around midnight, she felt it, a cold hand resting on her belly. Her eyes shot open, and she gasped. The room was pitch black, but she could feel the pressure of the hand. She screamed, thrashing wildly, and the touch vanished. Jack arrived home the next morning to find Anna pale and trembling. She begged him to stay home, and he reluctantly agreed. Together, they decided to sleep in the living room, too afraid to stay in the bedroom. Chapter 7, The Truth Revealed. As the due date approached, Anna's dreams became more vivid. She often saw a woman in a blood-stained dress, cradling her swollen belly and whispering, "He's mine." One night, Jack found an old box in the attic filled with photographs and letters. They belonged to Margaret, the woman Mrs. Holloway had mentioned. In one of the photographs, Margaret stood in front of the house, her expression blank, her eyes hollow. Jack read one of the letters aloud. "The voices won't stop. They tell me it's not my baby. They say he belongs to them. I can't sleep, I can't eat. I'm afraid of what I might do." Chapter 8, The Delivery. The night Anna went into labor, the whispers were louder than ever. As Jack drove her to the hospital, the car radio turned on by itself, emitting static that sounded eerily like a baby crying. In the delivery room, the lights flickered. Anna screamed as pain racked her body. She felt cold hands gripping her arms, her legs, her belly. The doctors and nurses seemed oblivious to the strange occurrences. Finally, her baby was born, or a healthy baby boy. Anna held him close, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in months, she felt at peace. But then, as she looked into her baby's eyes, she saw something that made her blood freeze. His eyes were dark, too dark, and his smile was unnatural. Chapter 9, The Final Twist. Anna's relief turned to horror as the baby began to whisper, soft, haunting words that only she could hear. "He's mine," the baby said in a voice that wasn't his own. Anna screamed, but no sound came out. The room spun, and darkness enveloped her. When she woke up, she was back in her house. The nursery was empty, and the whispers were gone. Jack sat beside her, his face pale. "Anna," he said softly. "There was no baby. The doctor said you never were pregnant." Anna looked down at her belly, flat and lifeless. Her mind raced as fragments of memories flooded back. The whispers, the shadows, the cries, they weren't warnings. They were memories. Margaret's memories. Epilogue, the endless cycle. Anna left the house that day, vowing never to return. But as the years went on, the house remained, waiting for its next occupant, a woman, full of hope and dreams, who would hear the whispers and feel the shadows touch. Because some stories never end. Vocabulary summary. Whisper, speak softly or faintly. Creak, a sharp, harsh sound made by something being moved or twisted. Hollow, empty or void inside. Eerie, strange and frightening. Trembling, shaking slightly, often from fear. Flicker, shine unsteadily or waver. Reluctantly, doing something unwillingly. Haunting, remaining in the mind, often in a disturbing way. Cradle, hold gently and protectively. Envelop, to surround or cover completely.